There are moments in life that feel ordinary on the surface, yet carry a weight that lingers long after they pass. Today was one of those moments. You looked at your reflection, maybe in a mirror, a window, a dark phone screen, and for a brief second, something felt different. Not dramatic, not loud, just unfamiliar. As if the reflection was not merely showing you your face, but signaling something deeper. This was not imagination. This was not coincidence. According to divine alignment, the reflection you saw today was a signal, and that signal marked the exact moment when something unseen reached its breaking point. This message comes with urgency because timing matters. In the spiritual realm, there are windows that open and close quickly, and what happened today belongs to one of those windows. The reflection was not about how you looked. It was about what was happening around you and within you. It was a silent alert, a pause in time where heaven allowed you to notice. Most people look without seeing. Most reflections pass without meaning. But today, your spirit registered something before your mind could explain it. What makes this moment rare is not the reflection itself, but what was intercepted behind it. There had been something lingering, quiet, persistent, unresolved. It wasn't always negative in an obvious way. It didn't announce itself with chaos. It stayed just beneath the surface, feeding on delay, uncertainty, and emotional exhaustion. It is how lingering things survive, unnoticed, unnamed, and unchallenged. But today, that cycle was interrupted. This is where Archangel Michael enters the picture, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but as an agent of interception. There is a difference between protection and interception. Protection shields you while something still exists. Interception stops something mid-course. It cuts it off before it can mature, escalate, or reattach. What you felt today was the ripple effect of that interception. A subtle shift, a heaviness lifting without a clear reason, a sense that something was off, but also strangely resolved. The reason this reflection mattered is because mirrors, in the spiritual sense, represent truth without filters. They show what cannot be hidden, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. When the reflection caught your attention, it wasn't calling you to analyze yourself. It was alerting you that a line had been crossed in the unseen realm. Pressure had reached its limit. Permission had been granted. And the breakpoint was activated. A breakpoint is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it feels like nothing happened. Yet everything changed. This was one of those moments. Heaven does not always warn with thunder. Sometimes it whispers through awareness. The reflection was that whisper. Understand this clearly. You were not meant to notice this message by accident. Out of all the reflections you've seen in your life, this one stood out because your spirit was already under watch. There had been a divine observation taking place long before today. Patterns were being monitored. Delays were being measured. Resistance was being weighed. And when the threshold was reached, intervention was released. This is why the title says watch immediately. Not because of fear, but because recognition locks in the interception. Awareness seals what has already been done. When you recognize a divine signal, you align with its outcome. Ignoring it doesn't undo the work, but acknowledging it accelerates the relief. You may have felt tired for reasons you couldn't explain, emotionally stretched without a clear cause, or stuck in a loop that didn't match your effort or intention. Those are classic signs of something lingering, something feeding on pause rather than attack. And lingering things are dangerous precisely because they don't feel urgent until they are stopped. Today they were stopped. The reflection was heaven's way of saying, This ends here. The break point was not about you failing or falling short. It was about pressure reaching a level that required divine force, not human effort. Archangel Michael does not intercept lightly. His involvement signals authority, finality, and closure. What was lingering no longer has permission to follow, observe, or influence your path. This part of the message matters because it reframes what you experienced today. It was not just a strange feeling. It was confirmation. It was the moment where the unseen aligned with the visible just enough for you to notice. That is rare, and it means you are entering a new phase with something removed that you didn't even know how to name. As this unfolds, don't rush to analyze every detail. Signals are not puzzles, they are markers. This one marked a turning point. The break point has already occurred. What comes next will make sense later. For now, what matters is this truth. You were watched over, intervened for, and redirected without having to ask. And as you continue listening, what is about to be revealed next will help you understand why this interception happened now and what it means for the days ahead. Here is a question rising quietly in your spirit right now, even if you haven't formed it into words yet. Why me? Why today? Why this moment, this message, this interruption in the normal flow of things? The answer is not random, and it is not flattering in a superficial way, but it is precise. This moment found you because you were visible in the unseen realm long before you became aware of it in the natural one. Visibility in the spiritual sense has nothing to do with popularity, noise, or recognition. It has everything to do with alignment, endurance, and the weight you've been carrying without quitting. Some people move through life spiritually dormant, untouched by deeper signals because nothing in them is being contested. Others, like you, attract attention not because you seek it, but because you persist. You continue even when clarity is missing. You remain even when answers delay. That kind of endurance creates spiritual traction, and traction creates notice. This is why the signal reached you. You were already being observed, not with suspicion but with intent. Heaven does not intervene where there is no future consequence. Intersection only happens when a path matters, when a direction leads somewhere significant enough to protect, redirect, or preserve. What you've been walking toward required safeguarding, and the timing of that safeguarding could not be postponed any longer. You may not feel powerful. You may not feel especially spiritual. In fact, you may have felt uncertain, drained, or overlooked. But those feelings do not negate what is true in the unseen. Often, the most targeted lives are the ones that feel the least dramatic on the surface. Quiet faith, private resilience, uncelebrated obedience. These are the qualities that draw both pressure and protection. This moment found you because delay had done all it could do. Lingering thrives in hesitation, but it loses power when purpose continues forward anyway. You kept moving. Maybe slowly, maybe imperfectly, but you didn't stop. That persistence narrowed the window for interference, and when the window narrowed enough, interception became necessary. Understand this. Not everyone receives signals. Some people receive consequences. Others receive collapse. A signal is mercy. A signal is warning wrapped in care. It is heaven saying, pay attention, not because you're in danger now, but because you're about to move beyond where danger can follow. That is why this came before anything visibly broke. Prevention is quieter than rescue, but it is far more intentional. The reflection was a personal delivery system. Not because you are self-focused, but because you were ready to receive without panic. Your spirit was mature enough to sense without spiraling. ready enough to pause without resisting. That readiness is rare, and it is earned through seasons where you kept your integrity even when no one was watching. This is also why this message is reaching you now and not later. There is a narrow overlap between awareness and alignment. Too early, and the message would have been dismissed. Too late, and the damage would already be done. The day sat perfectly in between. That is not luck. That is orchestration. As you listen, something else is happening quietly. Your discernment is sharpening. You may notice a clearer sense of what no longer belongs. Certain thoughts, habits, or attachments may suddenly feel foreign. That is not confusion. It is recalibration. When something lingering is intercepted, the mind takes time to catch up to the spirit's relief. This is why it matters that you don't scroll past moments like this. Messages like this are not meant to entertain. They are meant to align. And alignment grows stronger when it is shared, acknowledged, and anchored. If this message resonates, don't keep it silent. Engage with it. Let it mark you. So here is where your participation matters. If this message is speaking directly to what you felt today, if the reflection, the shift, the unexplained release make sense now, take a moment to respond. Like this message so it can reach others standing at the same break point. Share it with someone who's been carrying quiet weight they can't name. Subscribe to this channel so you stay connected to what is unfolding next. These actions are not about algorithms. They are about agreement. Agreement strengthens awareness, and awareness keeps interception sealed. The reason you are here is not because you were searching for answers. It is because answers were already searching for you. This moment found you because you were ready to recognize it without fear. And that readiness is what separates those who repeat cycles from those who cross thresholds. As we move forward, what will be revealed next is not about what followed you, but about what cannot follow you anymore. And when you hear it, you'll understand why this signal came exactly when it did. Before today, there was a quiet weight that stayed close to you, so familiar that you almost accepted it as part of life. It didn't always feel threatening. It didn't arrive with fear or drama. Instead, it showed up as heaviness without explanation, tiredness that rest couldn't fix, hesitation where confidence used to live, and emotional noise that never fully turned into clarity. This is how lingering presences operate. They do not rush. They wait. They blend in. They survive by convincing you that what you feel is normal, inevitable, or permanent. Lingering is not always attached to wrongdoing or failure. Sometimes it attaches to endurance. When someone keeps moving forward without collapsing, pressure looks for a place to sit. It stays close, feeding on repetition and delay, hoping time will do what force cannot. You may have noticed it in patterns. Cycles that almost broke but didn't, relief that almost arrived but stalled, doors that cracked open and then paused. Nothing disastrous. Just enough resistance to slow momentum. This presence followed quietly because it was allowed to. For a season. Not because it had authority over you, but because your growth required discernment, not escape. Some things are permitted temporarily so you can outgrow them rather than run from them. But there comes a moment when permission expires. That moment arrived today. What made this dangerous was not intensity, but duration. Lingering works by staying just long enough to grain expectation. It whispers, this is as far as it goes, or maybe later, where this is just how things are. And if left unchecked, it reshapes belief before you realize it. That is why intervention was necessary now and not later. The longer something lingers, the harder it becomes to recognize it as foreign. You didn't imagine the shift you felt. You didn't overthink the release. something truly disengaged, and it did so without requiring your effort, confrontation, or explanation. That alone tells you this was not psychological, it was authoritative. When something leaves without negotiation, it means it was removed by a higher command. The lingering presence did not leave gently. It was intercepted, cut off mid-influence. That is why the aftermath feels strange. You may feel lighter, but also disoriented. Calm yet alert. That is the nervous system recalibrating after pressure lifts. Silence can feel loud when you're used to constant background noise. This is also why you might struggle to explain what changed. Interception doesn't always give language, it gives space. And space can feel unfamiliar at first. But make no mistake, the absence you feel is not loss. It is clearance. There is something important you need to understand here. Not everything that follows you is meant to finish the journey with you. Some things are assigned to test endurance, not to shape destiny. When their assignment ends, they are removed without warning. Today marked that end. Do not try to revisit what was lifted. Do not analyze it back into relevance. Lingering things lose power when they are unnamed and uninvited. The moment you feel tempted to re-engage mentally, remind yourself, if it could not stay without force, it does not belong without permission. And here is the deeper truth. This interception happened because what comes next requires clarity. You are approaching a stage where delay would have been costly, where hesitation would have been misalignment. Heaven intervened early, not late. Quietly, not dramatically. That is a sign of precision, not urgency born of crisis. As you listen to this, let it settle. You don't need to rush to understand everything. Some realizations unfold gently over days. Others land suddenly later. What matters is that you stay present. Hold on. What comes next changes how you will recognize signs from this point forward. Before moving ahead, receive this activation with intention. Type "I am released" in the comments if this confirms what you felt today. Blessing code 639 is now activated. What just happened in your spirit is not meant to stop with you. I feel led to tell you this clearly. When you sow into this message, you are helping light reach souls who are still carrying what was just lifted from you. The word says that when seed is released, heaven responds with harvest. And right now, God is opening rivers where dryness has lingered. I am speaking directly to you. This is your moment to act, not later. This is not a donation. It is obedience in motion, a prophetic response to what God is doing right now. As you give through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, linked in the description or shown my QR code, you are placing oil on a flame that must keep burning. I declare that every giver is marked for overflow, clarity, and divine acceleration. Do it now, and let your obedience become a doorway for someone else's breakthrough. There are moments when protection is no longer enough. When shielding alone cannot resolve what is unfolding, intervention becomes necessary. This is where Archangel Michael's role shifts from guardian to interceptor. His presence is not symbolic of comfort, it is symbolic of authority. When he intercepts, something is stopped mid-course. A pattern is cut off before completion. A force is halted before it matures into consequence. What occurred around you was not a gentle nudge, it was a decisive interruption. Interception means there was movement happening without your consent. Momentum. It was subtle, calculated, and patient. It was waiting for the right alignment of fatigue, distraction, or emotional vulnerability to press further. But before that alignment could fully lock in, authority stepped in. Archangel Michael does not negotiate with lingering forces. He does not warn them twice. When he intercepts, it signals that a boundary was crossed and a higher order was issued. This is important to understand because many people mistake silence for absence. They assume that because nothing dramatic happens, nothing is happening at all. But the most intense spiritual activity often occurs without visible signs. Battles are not always loud. Many are resolved before you ever feel the impact. You were spared not because you were weak, but because the cost of learning through damage was unnecessary. Archangel Michael's interception indicates that what was lingering had exceeded its allowance. Every influence, pressure, or assignment has a limit. When that limit is reached, continuation becomes violation. That is when intersection occurs, not out of reaction, but out of enforcement. This was enforcement. You may wonder why you didn't feel fear, why there was no panic or collapse. That is because interception removes threat before it manifests emotionally. You felt the release, not the attack. You sensed the shift, not the danger. That is not coincidence. It is design. When authority acts early, the nervous system never enters survival mode. Another sign of interception is sudden clarity without explanation. You may notice decisions becoming easier, boundaries forming without guilt, certain options no longer appealing. That is not you becoming rigid, that is influence being removed. When external pressure leaves, internal alignment strengthens. You are not changing who you are returning to who you were before interference began. Archangel Michael's involvement also confirms something else. Your path intersects with responsibility. Not responsibility in the sense of burden, but in the sense of consequence. Where you are headed carries weight. Influence follows alignment. And where influence exists, interference often attempts to follow. That is why your life required more than passive protection. It required decisive interruption. This interception was not emotional, it was legal. In the spiritual realm, authority operates on order. Something was operating beyond its assigned range. That overreach triggered response. Once response is triggered, removal is immediate. No explanation is owed to what has lost permission. That is why you were not asked to pray harder, fight longer, or endure more. The matter was not yours to resolve. You may feel a strange sense of finality now, as if something has ended, even though you can't name what it was. That sense is accurate. Interception closes loops. It ends cycles without ceremony. And once closed, those loops do not reopen unless re-invited. Awareness is what keeps them closed. This is also why revisiting old doubts, fears, or narratives will feel unnatural. They no longer have fuel. You might try to think them through and find nothing there. That emptiness is not confusion. It is absence. Absence where pressure once lived. That is a gift many never receive. Archangel Michael does not intercept repeatedly for the same issue. When he steps in, it is conclusive. The lingering presence was not warned. It was removed. And removal creates space. Space for clarity. Space for direction. Space for movement without resistance. Do not underestimate the significance of what has already happened. Many people spend years trying to push through what was simply meant to be cut off. You were spared that exhaustion. Not because you asked at the right time, but because heaven moved at the right time. As this settles, remain grounded. You do not need to announce the shift. You do not need to prove anything changed. Interception does not require validation. It requires alignment. Continue forward without dragging the weight that is no longer attached. What comes next will not feel rushed. It will feel clear. And clarity is the first evidence that interception was successful. A breaking point is often misunderstood. Many imagine it as collapse, failure, or an emotional explosion. But the most decisive breaking points are quiet. They happen beneath the surface, long before anything visibly falls apart. What you reached was not a point of destruction. It was a point of decision in the unseen. A line was crossed, not by you, but by pressure that stayed too long and reached too far. Pressure is allowed to test alignment, but it is not allowed to redefine destiny. Here is a moment when pressure stops refining and starts restricting. That moment is called a breaking point. It is when the weight placed on a life no longer matches the purpose assigned to it. And when that mismatch occurs, intervention becomes unavoidable. This breaking point did not arrive suddenly. It was building over time. Each delay, each unexplained heaviness, each moment where progress felt slower than it should have been added to the measure. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was ignored. Every ounce of resistance was counted. When the measure was full, the command was released. That is how breaking points work in divine order. They are calculated, not chaotic. What makes this breaking point hidden is that it did not require your breakdown to activate. You didn't have to reach emotional exhaustion or spiritual defeat. In fact, you were still standing, still functioning, still moving. That is exactly why the breaking point was reached. Endurance exposed the imbalance. The longer you remained steady under disproportionate weight, the clearer it became that something external was overstaying its assignment. At this point, something had to give, but it was never meant to be you. Breaking points are not about how much you can take. They are about how much you are meant to carry. There is a difference. You are capable of enduring far more than you should have to. Capability is not permission. And just because you can survive something does not mean it belongs in your future. This breaking point marked the moment heaven said, "Enough." This is why what broke was not your faith, your focus, or your forward motion. What broke was the attachment, the hold, the influence that depended on your patience to survive. When the breaking point is reached at the right level, removal happens without damage. That is what occurred here. You may notice that certain struggles no longer provoke the same reaction. Situations that once drained you now feel distant. Thoughts that once circled endlessly now stop sooner. These are not mood changes. These are signs that the breaking point did its work. When pressure breaks at the root, symptoms fade naturally. Another sign of a true breaking point is the absence of regret. You are not mourning what ended. You are not longing for what would remove. There is no sense of loss, only relief, even if you cannot fully explain it. That is because nothing valuable was taken from you. Only what was interfering with your next stage was removed. Hidden breaking points often feel anticlimactic. There is no applause, no dramatic shift in circumstances overnight. But internally, something stabilizes. You feel more grounded, less pulled, more present. That stability is the foundation for what comes next. Without it, advancement would have been unstable. This breaking point also reset authority. Where something once had access to your energy, it no longer does. Where it once influenced timing, it no longer can. That reset matters more than visible change. Authority determines trajectory, and your trajectory just cleared. Do not mistake calm for stagnation. The quiet you may feel now is not emptiness. It is alignment settling into place. Think of it as dust clearing after movement. Vision improves once the air stills. That is where you are now. What makes this moment critical is that breaking points do not repeat themselves in the same form. Once crossed, the system changes. Pressure that returns will not attach the same way. Influence that tries again will meet resistance sooner. Awareness has increased. Authority had been re-established. This is why you may sense a subtle confidence returning, not loud, not performative, but steady. Confidence rooted in clarity, not outcome. That kind of confidence is difficult to shake because it does not depend on circumstances. It comes from alignment with truth. The hidden breaking point was not about ending something you loved. It was about ending something that was quietly draining what you needed for the future. And now that it has broken, the path ahead no longer requires the same effort to maintain. What comes next will feel different. Not because everything changes at once, but because resistance no longer defines your movement. The breaking point has passed. The pressure has lifted. And the space that remains is not empty. It is prepared. The mirror you looked into was never just glass. It was a messenger. Not because it spoke in words, but because it reflected a truth your spirit was finally ready to notice. Throughout history, mirrors have symbolized revelation, not vanity, not self-obsession, but exposure without distortion. They show what is present without interpretation. And on this day, the mirror was permitted to show you more than an image. It became a point of alignment between the visible and the unseen. You did not stand there by accident. The timing of that glance mattered more than the act itself. In that moment, layers that usually separate awareness from spiritual movement thinned just enough for recognition to occur. You weren't meant to analyze your appearance. You were meant to feel the shift. And you did. Mirrors are often used as signals because they force stillness. You cannot rush past a reflection. Even a brief glance creates a pause. That pause is powerful. It interrupts momentum, and interruption is how messages are delivered when noise is high. Life had been moving quickly, carrying weight, managing pressure. The mirror stopped time just long enough for your spirit to register that something had changed. What you saw was not a warning of what you lacked. It was confirmation of what had been lifted. That subtle sense of unfamiliarity, the feeling that something was different but hard to name, was the absence of influence, not the presence of threat. When something leaves after being attached for a long time, its absence can feel strange. The mirror reflected that absence. This is why mirrors are chosen as messengers instead of dreams or voices. Dreams can be dismissed. Voices can be questioned. But a reflection is undeniable. It is personal, immediate, unavoidable. You cannot argue with what you feel in that moment because there is no narrative attached to it yet. Just awareness. Your soul recognized the message before your mind tried to explain it. That recognition is what matters. The soul does not need language to understand shifts in authority. It senses alignment instantly. That is why the moment stayed with you even after you walked away. It wasn't dramatic, but it lingered in a different way. Calm, clear, settled. The mirror also served another purpose. It returned agency to you. Lingering influences often work by keeping attention outward, on circumstances, delays, other people, unanswered questions. The reflection turned your attention inward, not in self-judgment, but in grounding. It brought you back into your body, your presence, your moment. That grounding broke the final thread of attachment. In spiritual order, messengers do not always announce themselves. Sometimes they appear as ordinary objects at extraordinary moments. The mirror was one of those. It did not introduce something new. It revealed what had already happened. That is the difference between warning and confirmation. You were not being told what might happen. You were being shown what had happened. This is why the mirror did not provoke fear. It provoked awareness. Fear belongs to anticipation. Awareness belongs to completion. You were standing at the edge of a completed intervention, not the beginning of a threat. The mirror simply allowed you to witness the aftermath. You may notice now that your sense of self feels quieter, less reactive, more centered. That is not detachment. It is recalibration. When external pressure is removed, internal noise settles. A mirror reflected that settling. A version of you without constant resistance in the background. This also explains why the message felt personal without being emotional. Messengers aligned with truth do not manipulate feeling. They deliver clarity. The mirror did not ask anything of you. It did not demand response. It simply showed you where you stood now, after the interception, after the breaking point. Do not underestimate the intelligence of that moment. The human mind often seeks complexity, but divine communication values precision. One glance, one pause, one recognition. That was enough. The mirror did not need to repeat itself because the message was complete. From this point forward, you may notice mirrors, reflections, or moments of stillness carrying more significance. Not because you are meant to search for signs, but because your awareness had been refined. Refined awareness notices shifts without effort. It recognizes alignment without strain. The mirror was not telling you to look harder at yourself. It was reminding you that you are present, protected, and repositioned. That reminder matters because what comes next requires grounded clarity, not lingering self-doubt. You were not being evaluated in that reflection. You were being acknowledged. Seen not for what you endured, but for what you are now free to move into. The mirror served its purpose, and now it fades back into being just glass again. But the message remains. Because once a messenger completes its task, what changes is not the object, but the one who received the message. There is something deeply unsettling, yet profoundly merciful, about things being removed without your permission. The mind wants control. It wants explanation. It wants to agree before release happens. But divine removal does not wait for human comfort. It moves according to necessity, not consensus. What was taken from you did not ask for approval because approval was never required. It had already overstayed its place. This removal was quiet on purpose. Loud removals create resistance. They trigger fear, nostalgia, and unnecessary attachment. Quiet removals bypass argument. They end things before the mind can defend what no longer serves you. That is why you were not given a choice. Choice would have prolonged what needed to end. What was removed was not something you cherished consciously. It was not a relationship you celebrated or a habit you protected openly. It was subtler than that. It lived in the background, an influence that shaped timing, energy, and expectation without ever introducing itself. Because it never announced itself, it never asked to leave. It simply assumed continued access. As the pumpkin expired, you may feel a strange neutrality toward what is gone. No grief, no excitement, just distance. That neutrality is evidence of correct removal. When something is removed by authority rather than effort, the emotional attachment dissolves with it. You are not left negotiating with memories or replaying scenarios. The attachment left with the influence. This is important. Removal does not mean something was evil or catastrophic. It means it was incompatible with where you are going next. Compatibility matters more than intention. Something can mean no harm and still cause delay. Something can feel familiar and still obstruct progress. Divine order removes based on trajectory, not sentiment. The reason permission was not requested is because your discernment was already stretched. You had carried weight long enough. Asking you to decide would have placed responsibility back on you when the burden was never yours to manage. Removal was mercy disguised as interruption. You may notice now that certain conversations feel irrelevant. Certain concerns feel distant. Certain fears feel oddly outdated. That is not avoidance. It is recalibration. When influence is removed, relevance shifts. Things that once demanded attention lose urgency. That loss of urgency is not apathy. It is clarity. Another sign of true removal is the absence of temptation to revisit. You are not pulled back to check what ended. You are not curious about re-engaging. There is no unfinished emotional business. That is because the removal was clean. Nothing was left behind to tug at you. This kind of removal often confuses people because it doesn't follow emotional logic. We are taught that endings require closure, conversations, understanding. But spiritual removal prioritizes function over feeling. It ends what interferes so function can resume. Closure comes later, often in the form of peace rather than explanation. You may eventually understand what was removed, but understanding is not required for effectiveness. Some things are better known by their absence than their definition. You will recognize what left by noticing what no longer drains you, what no longer delays you, what no longer shapes your internal dialogue. This removal also reset boundaries you didn't know were compromised. Where something once had access to your attention, it no longer does. Where it once influenced decisions indirectly, it no longer can. The boundary reset happened without confrontation because confrontation would have legitimized what no longer deserved space. It is natural to feel slightly off balance after a removal like this. When pressure disappears suddenly, the body and mind take time to adjust. But that adjustment is temporary. Stability returns quickly when the system realizes it is no longer compensating for something missing. It is simply functioning normally again. Do not mistake this phase for uncertainty. It is recalibration. Like eyes adjusting to new light after leaving a dim room. At first, clarity feels unfamiliar. Then it becomes natural. That is what you are experiencing now. There is also protection in not knowing everything that was removed. Full awareness can invite unnecessary fear or pride. Partial awareness keeps you grounded. You know enough to move forward without dragging what is gone back into relevance. What matters most is this. The removal was final. It was not a pause. It was not temporary. What left did so because it could not coexist with what is forming. And what is forming requires space, not negotiation. You did not lose anything essential. You gained capacity. Capacity to move freely. To decide without distortion. To progress without invisible resistance. That capacity will become more evident as you continue forward. Let yourself trust what has already been done on your behalf. You do not need to recreate the struggle to prove growth. You do not need to revisit the weight to honor the past. What was removed without your permission was never meant to require your approval. It was simply time for it to go. After interception, there is always an aftermath, but not the kind the human mind expects. There is no explosion, no visible wreckage, no dramatic evidence that something intense just occurred. Instead, there is a quiet rearranging, a subtle reordering. Life continues on the surface, yet beneath it, the structure has shifted. What you are experiencing now is not confusion. It is adjustment to a new spiritual atmosphere. When something is intercepted before it manifests fully, the aftermath shows up as absence rather than damage. You may notice that you are no longer bracing yourself for something you once expected. The tension you carried unconsciously is lucid. You wake up without the same internal resistance. Decisions feel less heavy. These are not mood swings. These are signs that a pressure you adapted to is no longer present. The body and mind are remarkably adaptive. When something lingers for a long time, even if it is unhealthy, you learn to function around it. You build coping mechanisms. You normalize the strain. When that strain is suddenly removed, the system has to relearn what ease feels like. That relearning can feel strange at first. Calm can feel unfamiliar. Silence can feel loud. But these sensations are temporary. One of the clearest signs of successful interception is the return of discernment. Not hypervigilance, not suspicion, but clarity. You begin to sense what aligns and what doesn't more quickly. You don't need to overthink it. Your body responds before your mind debates. That is because interference often clouds intuition. Once it is gone, intuition sharpens naturally. You may also notice that certain people, topics, or environments feel different now. Not necessarily wrong, but distant. A distance is not judgment. It is resonance shifting. When your internal frequency changes, what once felt normal may no longer feel relevant. This is not loss. It is alignment completing its work. Another part of the aftermath is emotional neutrality. You are not overly excited, nor are you discouraged. You simply feel steady, grounded, present. That steadiness is powerful. It is the emotional state that allows momentum without burnout. Intersection clears the way for sustainable progress, not emotional highs. It is important not to rush this phase. The aftermath is where integration happens, where your system learns that it no longer needs to guard against what is gone. If you rush to fill the space with noise, activity, or overanalysis, you delay integration. Let the calm do its work. Let clarity settle. You may be tempted to look for proof that something changed. You're destined to revisit old triggers and see if they still affect you. Resist that urge. Proof-seeking can reopen doors that were closed cleanly. Trust the outcome without interrogation. Interception does not require validation. This is also a time when subtle opportunities begin to appear. Not dramatic breakthroughs, but small openings. These are conversations, timely ideas, gentle confirmations. These are not coincidences. They are signs that resistance had been reduced. When the path clears, movement becomes smoother without forcing. You might also feel a renewed sense of personal authority. Not dominance, but ownership. A quiet confidence in your decisions. Less second-guessing. Less need for external reassurance. That authority returns when influence is removed. You are hearing yourself more clearly again. Be mindful during this phase. Not anxious, mindful. Notice what feels lighter. And notice what no longer demands explanation. Notice where your energy naturally goes now that it is not being siphoned. These observations will guide you without effort. There may be moments where you question whether anything really happened because it feels so calm. That doubt is normal. We are conditioned to associate significance with intensity. But some of the most important shifts feel peaceful because they are corrective, not reactive. What was corrected no longer needs attention. Hold on. What comes next will help you recognize how to protect this new clarity without fear or rigidity. You'll be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed. Before moving forward, seal this phase intentionally. Type "I receive clarity" in the comments if you feel this calm settling in you now. Blessing code 814 is now activated. What you are feeling right now is space. Space that God created so others could one day breathe through your obedience. I am speaking to you directly, When you support this message, you become a vessel through which light reaches those still trapped in unseen pressure. Scripture speaks of seed that opens the heavens, and this is one of those moments where action unlocks flow. Do not delay what your spirit already recognizes. Give now through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description and the QR code appears on the screen. As you release, I declare that peace will multiply, clarity will deepen, and provision will answer you quickly. Act now, and let your obedience speak louder than hesitation. After a break point, the most important question is not what was removed, but how you move now that it's gone. Interception clears the path, but direction is still chosen. What you do next determines whether the relief you feel becomes momentum or fades into familiarity. This is not about effort. It is about alignment. The role you play now is quieter than resistance, but far more powerful. The first thing to understand is what not to do. Do not rush to fill the space that was created. Many people mistake freedom for emptiness and immediately try to replace what left with activity, noise, or distraction. That instinct comes from adaptation to pressure, not wisdom. The space you feel is intentional. It is room for clarity to stabilize. Let it remain open long enough to orient you properly. Your role now is to move without dragging the past forward. That sounds simple, but it requires awareness. Old habits of thought may try to reassert themselves out of routine, not relevance. When that happens, pause. Ask whether the thought belongs to your current state or a previous one. You will often find it no longer fits. Release it without argument. You do not owe outdated patterns an explanation. Another key part of your role is obedience to clarity, not emotion. After interception, emotions may fluctuate briefly as your system recalibrates. Do not let temporary feelings override clear direction. If something feels lighter, simpler, or more grounded, follow that. If something feels forced, heavy, or unnecessarily complicated, step back. Alignment now feels calm, not dramatic. You are also responsible for protecting what hath been restored, not through fear or hypervigilance, but through discernment. Pay attention to what drains you versus what nourishes you. Not everything that is familiar is safe, and not everything that is quiet is empty. Choose environments, conversations, and commitments that honor the clarity you've been given. This is where many people slip, by assuming the hard part is over. Intersection removed what was lingering, but maintenance belongs to you. Maintenance does not mean guarding against attack. It means staying aligned so attack finds no access. That alignment is maintained through simple choices made consistently. Your role also includes acknowledgement. Recognition strengthens outcome. When you acknowledge what has changed, you reinforce it. This is not about announcing it publicly, but about agreeing internally. Agreement locks in transition. Quietly affirm that what was removed no longer defines your pace, your expectations, or your self-perception. You may notice opportunities arising that require decisions sooner than expected. Do not panic. These are not tests. They are confirmations. Movement follows clearance. When the path opens, steps appear. Trust your discernment. You do not need excessive confirmation now. You are clearer than you think. There is also a communal aspect to your role. What you've experienced is not isolated. Others are standing near similar breakpoints without language for it. When you engage with this message, when you like it, share it, or speak up, you are not promoting content. You are signaling alignment. That signal reaches those who need it most. So if this message is resonating, act on it. Like this video so it reaches beyond your screen. Share it with someone who has been carrying silent pressure. Subscribe to this channel so you stay connected to what unfolds next. These actions are not routine. They are responses. Responses keep alignment active. Your role now is not to explain the past, but to embody the shift. Walk as someone unburdened. Decide as someone no longer delayed. Speak as someone grounded in clarity rather than reaction. That embodiment is what seals the breakpoint into a new trajectory. You may feel tempted to wait for a dramatic sign before moving forward. Do not wait. The sign already came. It came quietly, intentionally, and personally. Movement now is your confirmation. Hold on. What comes next will show you how to recognize what is opening without forcing it, and how to step into it without hesitation. There is a specific kind of closure that does not announce itself. No final conversation. No dramatic ending. No clear moment where you can say, "This is where it stopped." And yet, when you look back later, you realize something unmistakable. The door closed. Not solely, not uncertainly, but completely. What you are standing in now is the aftermath of that closure. This door did not close to punish you. It closed to preserve you. Doors that close by divine authority do so because what lies beyond them no longer aligns with where you are being led. Keeping them open would have required compromise, delay, or unnecessary struggle. So they are sealed, not out of rejection but out of mercy. What makes this door different from others you've experienced is the absence of grief. You are not longing for what's behind it. You are not replaying scenarios or wondering what you could have done differently. There is no emotional pull backward. That is because this door was not connected to your identity. It was connected to your endurance. And endurance has a limit. When doors close quietly, people often miss the significance. They assume nothing happened because nothing hurt. But pain is not the measure of importance. Sometimes, the most critical closures feel like relief. Sometimes, they feel like nothing at all, until you realize how much lighter you are moving forward. This door closed because it had fulfilled its purpose. It revealed what it was meant to reveal. It carried you as far as it could without distorting your future. Beyond that point, it would have become a liability. So it closed. There is protection in irreversible closure. When a door is truly closed, you are no longer tempted to stand in it, waiting. You stop negotiating with the past. You stop leaving emotional baggage behind just in case. Finality brings focus. Focus brings momentum. You may notice now that certain options no longer feel available, even if they technically still exist. That is not limitation. That is discernment. When alignment shifts, accessibility changes. Not everything that can be revisited should be. The lack of desire to return is confirmation that the door is sealed. This closure also resets expectations. You are no longer measuring progress against an outdated path. You are no longer wondering if something behind you might still work if given more time. Time was already given. Enough time. Closure honors that investment without requiring further sacrifice. Another sign of true closure is peace that does not depend on explanation. You don't need to justify why the door closed. You don't need others to understand it. You don't even need to fully understand it yourself. Peace does not argue. It settles. That is what you are experiencing now. Do not confuse closure with loss. Loss takes something from you. Closure gives something back. Energy, clarity, direction. You did not lose access to something essential. You regained access to yourself without resistance. There may be moments when curiosity tries to pull you backward. Not longing, just curiosity. Resist it gently. Curiosity can reopen emotional loops that closure intentionally ended. You are not meant to audit what has already been resolved. Trust the seal. The door that closed also closed off certain patterns. Cycles that depended on that door remaining open can no longer repeat. That is significant. Patterns end when access ends, and access has been revoked. This is why you may feel a subtle increase in confidence now. Not because everything is clear, but because something is no longer confusing. Confusion often comes from standing between doors, one foot in the past, one in the future. Closure removes that tension. You are now fully positioned to face forward without divided attention. The past no longer competes for relevance. It has been honored, completed, and released. That release creates space, not emptiness, but readiness. The door that closed did not trap you. It freed you from waiting. And waiting is often more exhausting than moving. And now, movement becomes natural again. Not forced, not rushed, just aligned. What opens next will not require you to abandon what you've learned. It will build on it. But it could not open while this door remained ajar. Some things must end cleanly for others to begin properly. Stand confidently in this closure. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where you are meant to be, with a sealed past and an unobstructed path ahead. When a door closes by divine authority, it is never the end of movement. It is the clearing of alignment. What opens next does not rush in immediately, not because it is uncertain, but because precision matters. Openings that last are not thrown open impulsively. They are revealed when stability is established. That is where you are now, standing in the quiet space between closure and emergence. What opens next will feel different from what you are used to. It will not demand the same level of struggle. It will not require you to prove yourself through exhaustion. It will not rely on constant effort just to remain accessible. This next opening is built on clarity, not endurance. That alone sets it apart from what came before. You may notice subtle invitations rather than dramatic opportunities. A thought that feels right and stays. A direction that makes sense without pressure. A conversation that flows without resistance. These are not small things. They are indicators that alignment has replaced interference. When alignment is present, openings feel natural rather than forced. Do not expect what opens next to look familiar. Familiarity often belongs to old patterns. The new alignment often arrives quietly, without the emotional charge of previous cycles. It may even feel understated at first. That does not mean it lacks significance. It means it is stable enough to not require drama to announce itself. Another key difference is pace. What opens next will not rush you. There will be movement, but not urgency rooted in fear. You will feel prompted, not pressured. That distinction matters. Pressure demands action to avoid loss. Prompting invites action to gain clarity. You are entering a season of prompting. You may also notice that you are not alone in this opening. Support appears differently now. Not through rescue, but through reinforcement. People, ideas, and resources align more easily. You are not dragging things into place. They are meeting you where you are. That is a sign that resistance has been removed from the system. This opening is also protective. It will not expose you unnecessarily. It will not overextend you. It will not require you to sacrifice your peace to maintain it. If something demands chaos to exist, it is not what is opening now. What opens next respects your stability. There is often a moment of hesitation before stepping into a new opening, not from fear, but from unfamiliarity. You may question whether you are ready because you are not used to movement without struggle. That hesitation is normal. Do not interpret it as a warning. It is simply your system adjusting to a healthier rhythm. You do not need to prepare excessively for what opens next. Preparation already happened through endurance, through learning, through discernment. The interception and closure cleared what preparation alone could not. Now, readiness is less about effort and more about trust. Trust does not mean blind optimism. It means informed confidence. You have enough awareness now to recognize what aligns. You will know when something is right not because it excites you intensely, but because it settles you deeply. That settling is your signal. What opens next will also invite expansion, but measured expansion. Not everything at once. Not more than you can hold. Expansion that honors capacity lasts longer than expansion that tests limits. You are being expanded responsibly. Be attentive to simplicity. The next opening may simplify areas that once felt complicated. Decisions become clear. Priorities reorder naturally. You may feel less pulled in multiple directions. That narrowing is not limitation. It is focus sharpening. There is also a sense of continuity here. What opens next is not disconnected from your past. It is refined by it. You are not starting over. You are continuing without obstruction. The lessons you carry now function as support, not baggage. You may feel an urge to move quietly at first, to not announce everything, to let things form without interference. That instinct is wise. Growth does not need an audience to be valid. Let the opening establish itself before inviting commentary. As you step into what opens next, remember that alignment is maintained through awareness, not control. Stay present. Notice what feels grounded. Adjust gently when something feels off. You do not need to guard aggressively. Clarity does the guarding for you. This opening is not a test. It is a response to everything that was endured, learned, and cleared. It exists because the path is now unobstructed. It appears because the timing is correct. What opens next will not ask you to become someone else. It will ask you to be fully who you already are, without delay, without interference, without weight that was never meant to be carried forward. Step into it calmly. You are not late. You are not unprepared. You are simply aligned. This is where the message settles, not with intensity, but with assurance. What you have walked through was not accidental, delayed, or misunderstood by heaven. Every signal, every interception, every quiet shift unfolded under watchful authority. You are not standing at the edge of uncertainty. You are standing under covering. And covering brings peace that does not need explanation. Assurance does not arrive as excitement. It arrives as steadiness, as the knowing that you are no longer exposed to what once lingered, as the confidence that what was removed will not return in another form. Divine assurance anchors you so that even when circumstances fluctuate, your center remains intact. That is what you are receiving now. There is a difference between relief and assurance. Relief is the absence of pressure. Assurance is the presence of protection. Relief can fade if fear returns. Assurance remains because it is rooted in authority, not emotion. What you are stepping into now is assurance, a deep, quiet confidence that you are being guarded beyond what you can perceive. Covering means that you are not navigating this next phase alone. It means boundaries are enforced even when you are not aware of threats. It means redirection happens before missteps become costly. Covering does not remove responsibility. It removes unnecessary exposure. You are free to move forward without scanning constantly for danger. This is why your spirit can rest now. Not because everything is finished, but because what matters most is secured. Rest does not mean stagnation. It means movement without strain, progress without fear, decision-making without second-guessing. That is the gift of divine covering. You may still encounter challenges, but they will not feel consuming. They will not destabilize you. They will not linger. Cover challenges pass through rather than attach. You address them and continue forward without carrying residue. That is a clear sign of upliftment. Upliftment is not about elevation above others. It is about elevation above cycles. Cycles repeat until authority interrupts them. That interruption has already occurred. And now, upliftment lifts you out of repetition into progression. You are no longer reliving lessons. You are applying them. This clothing moment is not meant to stir emotion. It is meant to confirm truth. You are aligned. You are protected. You are released from what overstayed. And you are permitted to move forward without apology for your peace. Receive this assurance without questioning whether you deserve it. Covering is not earned through perfection. It is granted through purpose. You are covered because where you are going matters. Because what you carry must arrive intact. Because delay has already done enough. Let your nervous system register this truth. You are safe to move forward. You are safe to trust clarity. You are safe to let go of vigilance that no longer serves you. Safety is not the absence of risk. It is the presence of authority. As this message concludes, allow gratitude to replace analysis. Gratitude seals alignment. It acknowledges what was done without reopening what was clothed. A simple inward recognition is enough. Before closing completely, receive this final activation. Type "I am covered" in the comments if this assurance resonates with you now. Blessing code 902 is now activated. You didn't arrive at this moment by chance, and neither did this message. I am speaking to you directly. What you have just received is meant to travel further than your own life. When you give now, you are sowing light into places where clarity is not yet reached, and God honors seed released in obedience. Scripture declares that those who pour out become rivers, and this is your moment to let the river flow. Act now through super thanks, membership, or PayPal. The links are in the description and the QR code is on the screen. As you give, I declare divine return, multiplied peace, and protection over every area of your life. Do it now. Let your obedience speak, and let heaven respond. This message ends, but what was activated continues. Walk forward covered, assured, and uplifted.